Welcome back to Vintage Camera Digest. Today we're taking our first look at the Class of '59 and what would eventually turn out to be one of the most important cameras of the 20th century, the Nikon F. As a company, Nikon, or Nippon Kogaku as it was known then, can trace its roots back to 1917 as one of Japan's foremost suppliers of optical goods for scientific and military uses. In this capacity, they produced just about everything having to do with optics. Periscopes, binoculars, telescopes, microscopes, you name it. But because of the type of products they made, they weren't very well known outside of Japan. During World War II, however, they were chosen as the primary supplier of optical equipment for the military. This saw the company grow to over 20 factories and over 23,000 employees. Prior to the war, they had made some photographic lenses in addition to everything else. It just wasn't their main thing. After the war, however, they were reorganized for civilian production, and the company was reduced to one factory and only 1,400 employees. An interesting bit of trivia here is that they actually supplied the lenses for the Hansa Canon rangefinder way back in 1935, and they continued to make lenses for Canon up until 1947. Sometime around 1945, they decided to get into the camera business themselves, and since the lenses they'd been producing so far had been made for 35mm rangefinders, it made good sense for them to build cameras that would make use of those same lenses. So by 1948, their first rangefinder camera, the Nikon F, was released. The company decided to name the camera Nikon since it was a combination of the NI of Nippon and KO of Kogaku. And this also brings up the age-old debate of how do you pronounce the company that makes this camera? Nikon? Nikon? Over the next decade and a half, Nikon continued to innovate and released one successful rangefinder after another, culminating in the Nikon SP of 1957. The SP was notable as being Nikon's first camera that would accept a motor drive, which was the second most important thing that would help the company dominate professional photography for the next 30 years. The first most important thing, though, was this camera that hit the market in 1959, the Nikon F SLR. The F was very similar in size, design, and control layout to their rangefinders. It's like they took the SP and put a pentaprism on it. But one main difference between the F and the rangefinders was the brand new F mount lens bayonet. Nikon's rangefinders had used the Contax bayonet mount, but the choice of this new mount by Nikon, as well as their devotion to planned non-obsolescence ever since, proves that they got it right from the beginning. This new mount was made from stainless steel to be able to support massive new telephoto lenses, and it was larger than the previous rangefinder mount, which would allow for new lens designs with larger apertures. It was future-proof. So check this out. This particular F body was built in 1962. And here I have a modern 50mm 1.4 AFD lens that mounts and functions perfectly. How about that? And the range of lenses available on the very first day of release was from 21mm all the way to 1000mm. These would include several new F-mount lenses made specifically for this camera and other mounts that could be used with an adapter. No other manufacturer of the time would be able to claim such an in-depth professional system from day one. The Nikon F would go down in history as one of photography's greatest achievements and one of the most popular SLRs ever. During its production run between 1959 and 1973, Nikon would build around 862,000 units. Prior to the release of the F, pros around the world tended to favor German rangefinders. But the Nikon F changed all that and ushered in Japan's dominance in the SLR market that still exists today. So let's take a look at the camera. The shutter release, shutter speed dial, and winding lever are in more or less the position they'd be on the Nikon rangefinders. And as such, the shutter button is a little awkward to reach since it sits closer to the back of the camera. The focal plane shutter curtains are made of titanium foil and features a shutter speed range of 1 to 1/1000th of a second plus B and T. On the right front of the camera, you'll find the mirror lockup and the stop down lever, as well as the self timer lever. On the left front of the camera, you'll find the lens release button and a PC socket. There's a tiny window near the shutter speed dial that you can set to tell the camera what type of flash you'll be using. You have a choice among FP, M, and X-Sync. To change this setting, just lift up the edge of the shutter speed dial and rotate it until your selection shows in the window. By the way, the X-Sync speed for this camera is 1/60th of a second. On the bottom of the camera, there's a tripod socket, the back latch key, and a film reminder dial. You open the camera to load film by turning the key counterclockwise, then pulling off the back. The F also features an instant return mirror and automatic diaphragm control for its lenses, and the prism covers 100% of the field of view. This camera is rugged, it's big, it's heavy, and you can drive nails with it. And that meant that it was the camera of choice for professionals and photojournalists of the day. During the F's production run, there would be minor updates to the body. For example, after the F2 was released, Nikon decided to continue production of the F for a couple of years. You can tell one of these late model Fs, also known as Apollo models, by the plastic tip on the rewind lever and a redesigned self-timer lever. The biggest updates to the F were the release of a line of metered prisms throughout the various years. They were big and they were not all that attractive, but they did add a lot of functionality to the camera. So today's rather dreary and gray, but I'm headed out anyway. I've got plenty of Nikon F mount lenses to choose for this shoot, but for this shoot I'm going to stick with a few lenses that are more of the same time period as the camera. I've got a 50mm 1.4, a 28mm 3.5, and a 135 3.5, plus a 55mm macro. So let's go see what we can get. I've got a couple of rolls of Tri-X, and I may be pushing it to 800. We will see. You know, a couple of weeks ago I did a film comparison between Tri-X and Kent Mirror and Arista. And the Tri-X, even when underexposed and processed normally, looked really good. So I may shoot everything at ISO 800, and then I may decide to push, I may not. We'll see. Anyway, so before the rain starts coming down again, let's try to get a few shots in. I'm thinking about just doing, you know, we've got Christmas decorations up here in town, and probably just wander around in this area getting some decoration shots. I don't know, we'll see. So let's go. So this is a Nikon branded case. It'll hold one camera and 3 normal size lenses, and then it also has this strap that you could use with the 300mm 4.5 if you had that mounted to the camera as well. And the bottom here we have little bayonet mounts where the lenses will just pop on and pop in and off there. So it was an interesting way to carry gear, but it does leave a lot of room for wasted space. Got a focusing screen in here. So what I've got in here, I've got a 28mm 3.5. Actually, this is 2.8 centimeters. It's that old. I've got a 135 3.5. And over here I've got a 50mm macro 3.5. All of these are non-AI versions, or the 50 has been converted to an AI, but they are old lenses for sure. Also, the metering today, I'm going to use my Minolta Auto Meter 3. Just for incident light metering. Usually I've got my spot meter out here. It's not very contrasty out here today. Lighting's fairly even, so I think this will do the trick. But just wanted to point that out. Different metering today. And I am shooting this at ISO 800. So it's telling me 1/125th of a second at f8. All right. Let's go for it. We got the 50mm on here. Let's get more of the snowman in the back. And we'll go vertical again. can I find here detail-wise? Try a couple of different focusing points. Let's see, let's check that meter. Yeah, 125th of a second at f8. That's good. Let's go up to 500th of a second at f4. And again, just for good measure. What else to see here? So I've got the micro Nikon P 50mm, 55mm 3.5. So I'm going to go back shooting at 1/125th of a second at f8. So we have this bookstore here, Horton's Books and Gifts. It's one of the oldest bookstores in the state of Georgia. So I think I'll use the shallow depth of field, blur out this foreground post, and focus in on the sign. I may change lenses in the middle of this, we'll see. Let me meter again just to make sure we haven't moved much. Oh, f11 at 125th. All right. Let's go 250 at f8 then. Try not to get the sky in there because that will certainly be blown out. Let's do the 135 3.5. All right, where were we? 1/250th of a second at f8. I don't want to shoot at f8. I want to shoot at 5.6. So we're going to go 1/500th of a second at 5.6. I'm still getting some of the decorations on this post. All right, let's get something else here. Move along, see what else we can find. 500 at f8. Okay, there's a little more depth of field than I wanted, but I'm gonna try the 1/1000th of a second shutter speed. I don't know how accurate that is, but we shall see. So that will move it to 1/1000th of a second at f5.6. All right, let's go back to 1/500th of a second at f8. Since I'm shooting with a 135, the depth of field isn't that deep anyway. Let's finish up this roll of film right here. The shutter button placement on this camera is odd, but I mean it's the same as it was on the Nikon rangefinders just previous to this one's release. It's sort of just in a weird place. It's a little further back than I would like it to be. Eventually they moved the shutter release toward the front, which is a lot easier to reach with your fingers, but it's not a deal breaker at all. 1/500th of a second at 5.6. Let's do 1/250th at f8. All right, so I'm going to change film. But I like that last shot, and I'm sure I didn't capture that. So I'm going to change film and pick up right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop in a roll of film. The back is not hinged, of course, on these. It just slides off. Now, since it slid off, I'm having to keep track of where it is. The film loads easily. Alright, slide the back on. Lock it. Let's wind it to make sure that it catches. And it did catch. Good. Alright. So we're ready to go. Now we've got to figure out what that last shot was that I had lined up. Let's do 1/250th of a second at f8, 1/125th at f11. Let's do that. 1/125th at f11. It's not so much I want deep depth of field in the background. I want sort of deep in the front because I want to maintain the focus on this bunch of Christmas ornaments. All right, let's move along. 250 at 5.6. All right. Drop off a book, pick up a book. 1/250th of a second at 5.6. That is consistent with what we've been shooting the last few times. So I'm going to go 1/25th of a second, 1/125th of a second at f8. I will say that this is not terribly easy to focus. Type of focusing screen I've got on this is a micro prism only. So the center is just a micro prism. It does not have the rangefinder split image. Even though I do have that screen, it might be easier to focus with this 28mm with it. And I actually have it in the bag. And it's easy to change. So let's do that. So one of the reasons that makes the Nikon F such a fantastic camera is its flexibility, ruggedness, and the ease of changing you can change the prism easily by popping this little button in the back. Oh, I said easily. Let's use my multi-tool here, also called a key. There we go. So that prism pops right off. And the focusing screen is right there in the spot. So I'm going to hit that button again on the back. This screen will fall out and I will be able to place a new one in it. There we go. So let's put the, let's see which one this is. There's our split image. That's the one I want to use. And drop it in. Replace the prism. And focusing screen is changed quickly and easily. And if I had been inside and not worried about dropping all of this on the ground, I could have done it even faster. Now the question is this going to help me in focusing this 28mm? I think so. But let's see. So I've got the 28mm still on here. I'm going to shoot it at 3.5. We got this little Santa's mailbox here. And it does, the split image rangefinder does make this easier to focus. All right, I'm gonna put the regular 50 back on and finish up this roll. 1/125th of a second at f4. Let's go f2. So I've got 1/500th at f2. All right, let's see what else. All right, so we've got some nice reflective. Oh, I can get my usual self-portrait here. All right, 1/500th of a second at 2.8. It's almost closer than I can actually get. Mm-hmm. 1/500 at f4. Let's go 1/1000 at 2.8. Go for some shallow depth of field here. So 250 at 2.8. So that's a nice read here. I'm really liking this split image focusing. Probably should have been doing that before. So we've got an interesting decoration through this window, lit within itself, so it's giving off its own light. So even if I get a meter reading on it, let's see what it will do. And so an incident reading is 1/125th at 2.8. Let's do that, but since the subject has its own light, I want to rack it just a little bit, just to drag in some of that extra.
I'm going to drag it to 1/60th of a second. So I'm going to adjust my shutter speed to 1/60th of a second. And hope that the exposure will be fine, because I don't really have a way to measure the light coming from the ornament itself. Well, I'm going to overexpose it by a stop from what it says there, just because I want to be sure that we get this nice bubbly bokeh here. And then I'm going to throw one out of focus all on purpose just to get the bubbles, because that looks cool. A couple of rolls of film on the Carrollton Square. Christmas decorations on a dreary, nasty day. But like I said, just perfect for the Nikon F. All right, let's go process and see what we got.
What a nasty day for a shoot. I don't think I properly put the camera through its paces, so I'll need to take it out again soon. I was definitely surprised though by the older lenses. I didn't expect them to be terrible. I mean, they're Nikon glass after all. I just thought they might show their age a bit. I am glad I decided to change out the focusing screen while I was out there though. That was super easy and quick, and it illustrates just how flexible the Nikon F system is. It's like, hey, I need to swap out the screen, and 10 seconds later it's done. Probably less than that if I didn't have to dig out my keys to press the button. I also thought the dedicated case with the lens mounts was pretty cool. It sure made changing lenses quick since I didn't have to remove or replace a rear cap. It's not the most efficient use of space though. There's lots of dead space in there. There's lots of air, but it's cool. Anyway, lots of positive things about the F. I can only really think of two that bugged me. One, the non-hinged back was a bit awkward to use since once you remove it, you have to find a place to put it while you load the film. And two, the placement of the shutter release is a bit too far back. But both of these issues were addressed, and then some, when the F2 was released in 1971. But that is another story. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please hit that like button if so, and while you're down there, go ahead and click subscribe so you won't miss anything. I've got new content every week. Next week, I'll continue the Class of '59 series with an overview and photo shoot with Canon's very first SLR, the Canon Flex. So be sure to check back in next Friday. I'll see you then.